Huron Shaw here, the Earl of Upsets, telling you to watch my friends Monte and the Pharaoh on Long Island's #1 wrestling podcast show, and soon to be the world's #1 wrestling podcast show. That is going to be a big upset.
Welcome back to Long Island's #1 pro wrestling broadcast. Monte the Pharaoh, only seen here out of Monte's room because his studio is still under repair, where we've got special guest, Miss Rachael Ellering. Thank you for joining us.
Hello. Thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here.
So we usually shoot out of a studio, but for the beginning of the year, well, to get into it, the studio was getting ridiculous with its charges. So we were like, yeah, my partner left New York. He actually married a widowed wife of a wrestler who he met on the show, and which he will not be joining us tonight because his flight's delayed. He's on his way into New York. But anyway, long story short, he's shooting at Florida. I said, you know what? We can do this internet thing for a while, even though we hate it, right? Like, it's okay for a guest like yourself on the internet, but we like to be in studio, a little more professional look. But guess what? Just not working out right now. So we're just doing what everybody else is doing, but we're glad to have you.
This is going to be fantastic.
Well, I'm excited. So, listen, Rachael, you know, when it was first brought to me that we could have you on the show, I was very excited. And not just the fact that you're an Ellering, but about yourself, because there's so many interesting things about you. But I want to just start this off. Let's call it like growing up Ellering. So, first of all, we were discussing before the show, you grew up in Minnesota, correct?
I did. Yeah, I'm born and raised a Minnesotan. I will always claim that I'm a Vikings fan, so I live through that pain every season, no matter where I live. But yeah, born and raised in Minnesota. And then once I graduated college, that's when I moved to Calgary. And that's where I started my wrestling journey. And that would be the last time I lived in Minnesota, was when I ditched it for Calgary. And then, you know, here I am. 9.5 years later.
Let me reel you back a little bit before we get, because if anyone doesn't know Rachael Ellering, she is an award-winning power lifter, which is pretty sick in itself, and graduated college. We've got a lot to talk about, but first I have to understand something. So here you are, a kid, you're going to elementary school, let's even call it maybe junior high. What kind of shit do people give you for being the daughter of a wrestler or a wrestling manager?
You know, not much at all, because my dad wasn't active when I was born in December of 92. And so he was done being a full-time performer at that point. And so, you know, especially kids of like my era, anything they would be watching on TV wouldn't involve him at all. So, you know, there would maybe be a time or two that, you know, people would ask if I've ever got to, you know, go to a show or step in a ring, or, you know, do I know, you know, any famous people, that kind of stuff. Right. But it really wasn't a part of my day-to-day life, my childhood at all. My dad didn't take us to shows. So my first show that I ever went to, I was, you know, 16 years old. So it really wasn't a prominent part of my young life.
So I guess then my point is, so here you are, daughter of a famous dude or whatever else, and are you like, hey, everybody recognize me? I'm an Ellering, or was it just like, you know what, this is what he did for a living, and I'm just going to do my thing?
Yeah, very much. Just that's what he did. And, you know, even now, I really do have the same mindset as almost 10 years ago when I got into wrestling. And that's just wanting to forge my own path and wanting to do it on my own. And, probably as evidence that I have done it that way, because I've really taken a long winding path and, had ups and downs and all that. And maybe it would have been easier if I embraced being generational. But I'm very, very glad I did it the way I've done it. And, that's how I'll continue to do it. So, yeah.
Well, I think a big question though is what growing up in high school, did you play like what type of sports did you play and how did you get into powerlifting? Like how do you choose powerlifting?
Yeah. So in high school, I was a three-sport athlete: volleyball, basketball, and softball. Basketball being my favorite of the three. I was recruited to play collegiately. I played AAU in the summers for basketball. So that was initially the direction I thought I was going to go. And then when I entered college, it was my sophomore year, I believe, is when my mom, who also powerlifted, she suggested that I give powerlifting a try. And I really didn't want to. And, she's like, I know a guy that coaches people, and just give it one try. And so I went with her and I went to this guy's gym. And, the second I did my first deadlift, just trying these movements out, I was kind of hooked because, it's just you and the bar, and you can either lift the weight or you can't. And then I'm so deeply competitive that it's just that competition with yourself, right? To constantly be getting stronger and better. And so really fell in love with it right away, and did that for about, 2.5, 3 years throughout my college years. And then after I graduated college, I started wrestling training.
Okay, so you graduate college, right? You're like, okay, I'm gonna set myself up. Why wrestling? Why?
It is the most beautiful, perfect thing. It's just a combination of all the things that, even at 16, when I fell in love with it and decided that this is what I wanted to do, I still feel that way now. It's just this beautiful combination of, theater and sports and drama and athleticism and everything I've always loved, everything I've always been good at, all in a weird, crazy package, right? And it can be anything you want it to be for all of us, right? And you can change and grow. And it was just so fun for me to fall in love with on my own. And then, as I kind of grew older and through college, you just fall deeper and deeper and deeper in love with it. And I knew since I was 16 that's what I wanted to do. So I really did kind of like base my college experience around preparing myself to enter the wrestling world. And then, about 4 days after I graduated college, I packed up and there we go.
And there you go. So you're 16. What triggered you to say, this is what I wanted? Was it a particular match? Was it a particular wrestler? Was it a woman's wrestler or a man's wrestler? Or what was it?
Yeah. So I remember watching the weekly WWE shows at that point, and I really connected with Beth Phoenix, Natalia. Those were kind of the two women that I saw myself in on TV, which is at any point in wrestling, right? It's like there's somebody for everybody on TV. And those two were the ones for me. And I would just kind of fall down these YouTube rabbit holes of, just whatever would play next. And, what's this? I've never heard of this person. And I'd watch this or that. And, I really fell in love with the Trish and Lita main event of Raw match that really got me thinking, wow, I could do this on a big scale, a big level. And, at that point in time, I graduated college in 2015. That was really when like the women's revolution, evolution, whatever you want to coin that time frame, was starting to take place. So I just thought it was the perfect time for me to enter the business, really.
So how do you enter the business? Do you leverage your father's connections, or are you instantly, because you're this athlete, the school's ready to take you up in Canada?
My dad has never helped me with anything in my entire career. We don't talk about wrestling together. Like there's no involvement like that. So I kind of narrowed it down to a couple schools that I was interested, that had good reputations. And then I landed on going to the Storm Wrestling Academy, which it was Lance Storm's school up in Calgary. I had just seen how many successful women he had trained specifically, successful guys too, but a lot of really, really great females had come out of his school. And so I thought, hey, that's a perfect place for me to start. And the way his camp kind of worked was it's a 3-month course and it's 5 days a week. And so I really liked the idea of like jumping in all the way, and not just, well, you go and you do a day or two a week. It's a nope. You come up there. I had never stepped foot in a wrestling ring before, and so I took my first bump there, learned everything from scratch there from Lance. And then at the end of my 3 months, I was booked on an independent show. And so he took me from knowing nothing, and taught me everything until I was ready to get on shows.
Now, and I mean this respectfully, right? You're a legitimate athlete, right? And we all know that pro wrestling is scripted and there's a lot of athleticism behind it. Did you have trouble transitioning there, considering the pedigree that you have as an athlete?
No, I really thought everything came, I don't want to say easy as if this is easy, because it's the hardest thing you'll ever do, right?
Mm-hmm.
When people are even okay at this, that's a success, because it's so hard to do, right? So, much less being good and great at it. But that natural athleticism, being a 3-sport athlete and then powerlifting, all of that really was so beneficial in things like footwork and just understanding your body and where you need to place it in the ring at certain points, working with other people, right? Because I've done team sports, individual sports. And then really just that being obsessed with wrestling and loving it makes any kind of trials and tribulations easier to deal with, So even if there is like a bump in the road, or it feels really challenging at certain points when you're like, well, I'm just trying to get these flip bumps down, or, whatever. I'm not great at taking a backdrop and I got to get this down before, next week's class. And it's just easy to want to go through that kind of struggle because you just love it so much.
So you go to mom, hey mom, I'm going to wrestle, right? I graduated, I'm going to wrestle. Now, I'm assuming, being the wife of a pro wrestler or a pro wrestling manager, again, we all hear these stories in the older days. I know that the industry has changed and gotten a little more professional. What was mom? Was mom angry? Was she disappointed? Or was she, go ahead, girl, do your thing?
My mom has always been the most supportive person in my life. Always. I could have told her I want to be a garbage man, and she would say, you're going to be the best one there is, And so she was on board immediately. She's like, okay, if that's what your heart is set on, that's what you want to do, I'm going to support you every step of the way. And she still does. She flew up to Calgary to surprise me at my very first match.
Wow.
She's really been there every step of the way for me. And, at the high points, the low points, she's always the person that I call, I can, cry to, can celebrate with. And, my mom's like my best friend. So she was completely on board. And which, it's very funny how polar opposite my parents' reactions were. My parents split when I was in first grade. So, they also have separate lives. But yeah, my mom was, encouraging from day one.
Okay. And being a female in pro wrestling, right?
Mm-hmm.
An attractive female, right? Were you worried about, because the industry does have a reputation of not treating females the best. Did you have concerns about this at all?
When you're kind of young and naive, right? You just, at times you think okay, I'm going to finish training. I'm going to be on all these shows, and hopefully you get signed to a TV company one day, and you're kind of just looking at everything through rose-colored glasses, right? Because it's just this new, bright, beautiful world. And, at that point, you haven't really gone through any lows yet. So you just kind of think, oh, it's going to be a straight arrow. This is the goal. This is what I want to achieve. It's going to be great. I've worked hard, so I'll get there. So that kind of stuff never really crossed through my mind initially. But I will say Lance was an incredible teacher. He's also a father of daughters. And so, he and we would have tons of conversations about stuff like that. And even if I couldn't fully understand it in the moment, because I hadn't had these experiences yet, he would tell me about them. He would try to teach me and kind of guide me along the way. And
can you share a conversation you had with Lance about that type of situation?
Sure,
what kind of advice he gave to you?
Yeah. I remember once asking him, because I'm very much still to this day, sporty spice, very much an athlete, not, super, super feminine in my presentation, and I'm an athlete, and that's kind of what I've always wanted to be, is myself. And so we had plenty of conversations, me asking him, how do I make sure I don't end up somewhere and they want me to change everything about myself? And, how do you deal with that when those topics are brought up to you, right? If you get signed somewhere and they ask you to change your appearance or your gear or whatever, and just kind of navigating the presentation that I've wanted to have my whole career, and that being authentically myself, which can be really hard to do in pro wrestling. It's easy to get caught up and kind of see what worked for someone else and think, well, maybe if I try that, there you go. And it's easy to lose yourself in wrestling, right?
Right.
And so I'm very happy that I've had good guidance and good people around me where that hasn't happened. And I really do feel like I'm the same person I was 10 years ago. So those conversations with him about just overall presentation and remaining authentic were so valuable.
Social media, right? Our best friend sometimes, and some of our worst enemy, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
again, I think about the female perspective on it, right? Because females in wrestling have to dress a certain way, right? In most cases, how hard is it for you personally to dress a certain way, and then having to deal with, our keyboard warriors that are out there that feel like they could critique anything? And how does that affect you emotionally? Because I could only imagine, I'm not saying anybody but says anything bad to you, but I'm assuming they do, because they say a lot of stuff to me, calling me fat every day. So
Yeah.
I got to assume someone else gets some of it. So,
Yeah. Oh, of course. Of course.
so how does that affect you?
Yeah, it can be really challenging, especially when you're dealing with 100 things outside of, Twitter and Instagram. And then you go there to check on your page or interact with people, and that's what you're met with. It can be so challenging, and it can be a day ruiner, right? Like, I'd be lying if I said I haven't had many days where it just completely defeated me. And it kind of breaks your heart a little bit, because how much you put into doing this, and the reasons you want to do it, and the impact you hope to have on people, right? And it is always the minority, but they're a vocal minority, and we're all human, right? So you read it, you see it, sometimes you internalize it, sometimes you don't, depending on the frame of mind that you're in. But it's countless times I've been told that I'm fat, I'm not pretty enough, to get different gear. I've had so many people in the last couple years, especially, say like, well, she should present differently, and, maybe wear like cuter outfits. And, for me, a cute outfit is matching a pair of basketball shoes with a great jersey, or, something that I like. And I put a lot of time and effort into, picking out those outfits and putting thought into them, but it's in my own way. But some people are very stuck on wanting female wrestlers, especially, to present in one specific way. And, there was a time where I kind of let it get to me a little bit. I had just started with NXT, and I tried to show up to, our TV tapings every week in a dress, and, wear my hair down more, and always put makeup on for everything. And so I kind of tried that. And, not only did it not get me any further than I already was, but it just felt so inauthentic. And I felt like I was lying to myself and lying to people who genuinely wanted to see me succeed, and my fans and people who care about me, right? And I never want to be that person. And so, you see stuff every day, people that are on TV in great shape with abs and great spray tans, they'll hear stuff. So it's unavoidable. And unfortunately, it's just kind of growing and getting worse, I personally feel, which is really challenging. I've been a lot quieter on social media the last year or two, because I had just found that it was kind of almost becoming 50-50, bad interactions and good interactions, right? And you always want the good to outweigh the bad. And so, for, like you mentioned, just your mental health and your well-being, I thought, you know what, I'm going to kind of take a step away from that. And I'm on there, but I'm not diligently like always
Right.
posting and trying to do stuff.
Well, let me ask you this: as a human being, and it happens to all of us, why do we listen to the vocal minority? It's like you could get 40 things that say thank you, you're the best, and you get the one. And why do we always focus on the one?
Yeah, I think it is a deeply psychological human nature thing that's in all of us. And it is so funny because it's like you'll get, 100 wonderful interactions and nice, kind things said about you. And you see that one or two saying, oh, you suck, you're fat, you don't even deserve to be on this show. Some people are extremely cruel and, you know, ask you to harm yourself and they're just crazy. But I
Wow.
think it is just human nature that's like deeply rooted in all of us to want people to like us and want people to accept us, right? And then when you're doing something with all your heart and all your effort and you put your body out there, your time, your everything, and when you're met with that reaction, it's just a heartbreaker.
Share with us your experience at NXT. How was that first experience for you?
Yeah, so I had done a lot of extra work at NXT before I actually was a contracted wrestler there. So I signed in 2019. I was there under contract for about a year and a half. So it really was a short time period. And I didn't love my time there. I learned a lot, but I spent about half my time injured. I tore my ACL early on into my time there. And so, you know, I don't think anybody looks back at having an injury like that and working through that as a fun time in their life.
Right. Yeah, sure.
So, it was extremely challenging for me. And then, when the pandemic hit and they let 100 of us go, it's a heartbreaker. When I was under contract for that year and a half, I had 0 TV matches. I was just working house shows and such. So I feel like I didn't really have the full experience of working there. Right. I trained, I got hurt, I was on the local shows and stuff, and then that was that. So, I have some good memories from that time. Still, oh, sorry, my cat's treat machine is now going
Okay.
off in the
There you
background.
go.
That can inject some good mood in here, right? But my tearing my ACL was still to this day probably the hardest thing I've ever gone through in my life.
Now, who was running in NXT at the time you were there?
So the head trainer at the Performance Center was Matt Bloom. The head trainer for the women was Sarah Amato. I think she still is their head trainer. And then the specific classes that I was in, my first maybe 2 months was taught by Norman Smiley, and he is the best coach there. I could rave about Norman Smiley for days. I have so much respect for him. He was such a great teacher. And then I was moved into one of the all girls classes kind of after you get your feet wet there. And that class was run by Serena Deeb. So oddly enough, my coworker now.
There you go. Unbelievable, right?
Yeah. Kind of a full circle moment.
That is a full circle. When you get let go from NXT, can you share what your emotions are like? Because, here you are, this is a train, and you're like, this is my step up, and this may be the dream I've been looking for. And it unfortunately doesn't work out at that moment. Doesn't say it's not going to work out in the future. What was it like for you? Did you have a moment where you're like, I'm going to quit, I'm done, or what was
Oh
it?
no, I never thought that. I never thought that. I mean, I was still really early in my career. I got let go. So that would have been 2020 when the pandemic hit. And so I was 6 years into wrestling, 5.5, 6 years in. So that is still so early in someone's career. So I never, ever thought, well, that was it, right? I gave it the good try and it didn't work out. It's devastating to get that call. And I feel for people every single time you see that there's releases anywhere. My heart goes out to those people because I think all of us, no matter where you are, wherever your feet are, you put your all into it and you hope that it's going to work out, right? You'd be crazy to not think that. So I, of course, had that approach and that mindset when I was in NXT, even if it was just that brief period of time. I always thought, I would succeed there, that I had everything it took to succeed there, that their system would work well with me as well, and so you can think those things and put your all into it. And when the rug gets pulled, oh, it hurts. It really does, right? And you're kind of in shock for a little bit. It's like the stages of grief, right? You have a day where you're just floored, like, I can't even believe that happened. A couple days go by, now you're pissed off about it. You get really mad, and then you're sad and you got to cry it out a little bit, right? But I immediately knew, okay, once the pandemic kind of eases up a little bit, once it's easier for shows to be running and travel again, I'm just going to get right back to it. It's all I've wanted to do, and my whole heart is still, and it's still to this very day. But in that moment, especially, it's like, oh, my heart never thought for a second that I wasn't born to do this.
That's great. Now, you also worked at AEW. What is the atmosphere in AEW compared to NXT?
Yeah, they're very different experiences for me. Granted, I'm at different points in my career as well, but I find I have really fantastic relationships with a lot of the girls in the locker room at AEW. I could call them if I needed something and they would pick up. They would be there if I needed them. I have enjoyed just countless hours before shows, late night after shows, just sitting there talking about, not even about wrestling, right? But just sitting and talking with them as people. And so I so enjoy the company and the relationships I have with the women in the locker room at AEW and ROH, where, it partly was because I was out injured for half the time I was in NXT, but, I got along with the people I knew previously from the independents or that I had worked with doing extra work in NXT. But, there was a little divide in the locker room. It wasn't as tight knit. And this is also in 2019, so things I'm sure have changed, and, I hope they're fantastic for everyone. But, I specifically enjoy just the interpersonal relationships I have with the people at AEW.
So I know we haven't really talked about your father at all, and I'm not going to get into it, but did he give you, I know he said he didn't really help you at all, but did he give you any advice? Like, look at, because back in his day, from what I understand, is that, they took care of themselves, right? They had to keep their spot. They had to make sure that if they had to bury somebody, they did it. Did he give you any advice, like just be careful?
No, it sounds like I'm lying when I say we don't talk wrestling, and we never have.
I get
Yeah,
it.
but I promise, no reason to lie. So no, and I appreciate that that's what it's been, because it is so different. It's a completely different business than it was when he was in his prime. And so I don't think that advice necessarily crosses over to the current world of professional wrestling. And then it's so different because I'm a female having these experiences that he'll never have,
Right.
And so I've had really great guidance from a lot of people and really good people in my corner, so I thankfully have, never been in a bind when I do need input or feedback or advice. I can always find that from, people I look to. So I'm glad we've kept those worlds separate.
All right, but here's a world that maybe didn't keep separate, right? So you are engaged to another professional wrestler, right, Chris
I
Hero?
am.
So I'm going to ask you as just a fan, and I'll call you a friend because we're doing a show together.
We sure are now.
What are you doing getting engaged to another wrestler? What is
Yeah.
dad and mom saying to you? Like, what are you doing, Rachel?
Yeah, Monty, you're 100% right. When I started wrestling, I told myself, it was an unofficial rule that only I knew. I was like, I'll never date a wrestler, ever. Nope. I want those things to be separate, business and personal life separate. And then about 6 months into my career, I met Chris. And he is just the greatest person I've ever met in my whole life. He is the kindest person. He has such a big heart. His love for wrestling is unmatched. I've never met anyone who loves wrestling more than him, knows as much about wrestling as he does. So, I don't even know if our first dates, I guess you could call them, we're all watching wrestling and, training at schools around Orlando and getting ring time. And
I got it. All right. How do you start dating him? And then what is how does it even come about? Like, explain how you end up becoming a pair or a couple.
Yeah, so we had started to just hang out almost every day of the week, if we weren't traveling for shows. And so, and then that turns into, oh, I can pick you up at the airport so you don't have to pay to park your car. And we both are big basketball nerds. And so, oh, hey, March Madness is on. Let's watch these games together. And, before you know it, I was just spending all day, every day with this guy.
He knew what he was doing, right? He was reeling you in just with all that, right?
Yeah. He's like, hey, this long hair and the beard, she's not going to be able to say no. Yeah. And, that just, it was months and months that had passed before we even were like, I feel like we have been dating without ever putting a title on it, And so we eventually put the title on it, and, here we are. We've been together 9.5 years.
9.5 years.
Yeah.
So I hope your talk isn't about wrestling. Like you said, he's coming in late today. My partner's not on the show. He's stuck on a plane.
Yes.
Your fiance's. You're not talking wrestling all the time, right? You're talking like real life stuff, or is it like, hey, did you see that arm bar? I mean, come on.
Jokingly say all the time that I tell him any thought that passes through my brain. Like anything, right? And so we do talk a ton of wrestling, of course, because it's such a prominent part of our life, right? He's a coach, a producer for AEW. So we work together. And so, at the end of a day, if we're both at the same TV taping and stuff, it's like, okay, you get back to the hotel and you wind down and talk about your day, just like normal people would, right? We watch a ton of wrestling. We, just Sunday evening, we went up to Greensboro and we trained in a ring together. And so it is a huge part of our life because it is like our hearts, right? Like he's been doing this 25 years. It's been his whole adult life. And, it's been my whole adult life now too. And so that is a huge thing, but oh my gosh, we're big sports nerds. We love watching Star Wars and Marvel movies. And,
wow.
We have our shows that we watch. We're very proud cat parents. We have they're our children, right? So
wow.
A ton of our time is spent on that. He is a fantastic friend, and that sounds kind of silly, but he is so good at like keeping up with and communicating with so many people in a million time zones, right? So he's great at that. We're really close with my mom. The three of us are like, we go on little adventures, and so it's a wide variety of things that we talk about. But I can't believe I fell for a wrestler.
I can't believe I was a little upset with you.
I know.
I know. What are you doing? What are you doing?
If it makes you feel better, he's a fantastic human being.
Right.
So even if he wasn't a wrestler, I would still love the man with every bit of me.
I get it.
Yeah.
So let me ask you, today's wrestling, it's more of a television type of show. Do you think that the house shows are becoming a thing of the past, and the lack of work you get in? I'm assuming, again, I'm not a wrestler, but I'm assuming gym time and mat time in a nice cushy facility doesn't match up back in the day where your old man was back when these guys were doing 300 days a year. They were refining their skills. Do you think it's hurting today's wrestling not getting that kind of work in?
I do. I do think that is something that is sadly missing, even just in the last 10 years. There's been a really big shift to, there was that period where everybody was getting signed by a company, and there's limited TV time, right? And so there's limited time to have these matches in front of active crowds. I wish we had untelevised, unstreamed, unfilmed shows that we all of us at all levels could go work on and try things and mess up and get reps in with somebody that maybe you're about to go into a program with. I think that is so sadly missing, and really is hindering and will hinder the younger talent. I was very lucky when I first started wrestling. It's like I was on 2-3 shows a week, every week, right? And then I went to Japan with Stardom, and it's like you'd be having 4 matches a week, and you're training at the dojo on your off days. And even when I was at the Performance Center, it's like I was at the PC 5 days a week, and then there were 3 house shows every week. So you're at least constantly callousing your body to this, right? and
Right.
something you get feedback on from this match, you can immediately take that and try to better it the next night, right? Which, like previous generations, it's like, you're in a program with someone and you're seeing them 5 days a week. So by the time you get to the big payoff match, I mean, it's going to be fantastic,
You're
right?
ready to go. Right.
Yeah, yeah. So I do think that is severely missed. I myself feel like in the last year or two, I've lost a step working so infrequently. Um, and being under contract, that's such a tricky thing because technically we can take independent bookings. You have to get them approved. They can't clash with any shows or travel that you have as a contracted talent. But then there's also that risk of if you do that and you get hurt on the independent show, you've really put yourself in a corner, right? And so it's such a challenge, and like you said, it's hard to find good, reputable, safe schools that have a good ring, good people to train with, that have good intentions. I'm
Well,
lucky.
I think the problem, not to cut you off, but I think a lot of the problem is everybody can do everything, right? I mean, me and
Yeah,
Jimmy, we do a podcast that became popular. I don't know, we're old guys, right? But like everybody's a wrestler, everybody's an actor, and if you you do an indie show and you go with, you work with some untrained person, you could end up screwing yourself up pretty bad.
yeah, 100%. And I know that's a big holdup for a lot of us AEW Ring of Honor talent. I see it online, again, back to fan comments online, but all the time people, well, if they're upset they're not booked on TV, go work a bunch of indie shows. And it's like, yes, the principle of that is right. Your heart is in the right place, I suppose, but it's definitely not as easy as just, well, let me just go get on a couple local shows where the board's broken in the middle of a ring and, the ropes are really wobbly and, there's no mats outside of the ring. It's not clean. You're working with someone who's a month into training that, only knows how to do a tackle. And so it's like there's a lot that goes into, okay, I'll work this show. I know who I'm working with. It's a promoter I trust that I can work with and I'll be safe and taken care of. Because a lot of places that's not the situation, right? A lot of wrestling schools, that's not the situation. You're not always in there with someone who should even be training, like considering themselves a trainer, right? And so you have to really pick and choose your spots, as they say, right? And try to get the reps in when you can, try to improve on the things you can control. Whenever I talk to like younger girls starting in wrestling, I always just tell them, like, even if you can't get on a show that week, watch a match you're unfamiliar with. Work on your promos that week, right? Try to come up with, if I was in a match with it's me and Monte on Friday night, what would I say in a promo? What are a couple ideas I could have for that match? And at least just keep your brain working in that regard because it can be really hard to get quality ring time.
What do you think is more important, mat skills or mic skills?
It's a very tough question. I am a sucker for mic skills. I really am. But in today's wrestling, I don't think you can say it's one or the other because the success of all, the top, it's like these matches are incredible. And the things they pull off, the crazy stuff that they're doing weekly. It's not even like once a month you'll see a really great match. Every week in every company, you're going to see great matches because the bar has just really been raised. People are better trained, better athletes. Once that standard is kind of raised, everybody tries to meet it. And so, but I personally am just a sucker for when somebody can really make me feel something when they talk, when they get a 30-second, backstage pre-tape and making the most of that. I'm also my bachelor's degree is in communication studies. So, I love doing promos. I have cherished every single minute I've got to do any mic stuff in ROH specifically. And I don't know, that's how you get people to really care about you and get to know you is by telling them who you are. Because, you could go out there and do a tackle just like I could. So what's the difference, right? And it's, hey, I'm going to get them to know me, and then hopefully they care about me, and thus will cheer or
Well,
boo,
well,
right?
that's it, right. So that's the name of the game, right?
Yep.
Caring, right?
Yeah,
Being invested into the character. At least when
totally.
I was watching wrestling and was younger. So here's a tough question. So the old school fan would say the older wrestlers, they wrestled 350 days a year. They had it so much harder than today's wrestler. The money wasn't nearly as good. And then you have the new wrestler that will say, hey, look, we're under constant scrutiny every day. Like you just said, you can't even work on the side without people seeing you and critiquing you. So if you're, I'm sure, like, again, just because your father's Ellering, the Road Warriors, I'm sure their house show matches, there were a lot of mistakes going on there at the time as they were trying to work out stuff, right? Working these programs. But you're under this critique. Which is more difficult today, being today a wrestler today, or being a wrestler in yesteryear?
I think there's difficult aspects from both eras. I think it was much more challenging previously in terms of travel, and durability with your body, right? It's like even in basketball, football, it's like technology has really raised the bar, right? And so, how people always say, like, LeBron James invests $1 million a year into upkeep for his body. And he's in a cryo chamber, he's doing red light therapy, like there's all this stuff for recovery and taking care of your body. Whereas, in the 80s, even the 90s, like this stuff wasn't a thing. And just the sheer volume that they were working, their bodies, you're wrecked, right? You're callous to it because you're doing it so frequently, but bumps are bumps, right? And so I think it was much more challenging back then. Air travel. I mentioned to you before we got on the air, I'm very spoiled. We live in Charlotte, and because it's an American Airlines hub, I get a direct flight 95% of places, right? And that is such a treat for your body to just have to get on one plane. When you get off, you're there. Hotels are a little nicer than they used to be. So, in that regard, I think they had it much harder. I think it is something that maybe the older generation can't fully grasp, is that, or not everybody, right? But certain people, there's never a turn off button for the current generation. It's like you leave the show and you're met with all of this criticism or praise or whatever on your phone, right? So you're constantly stimulated by this versus being able to kind of digest and take a step away from this crazy world. And so in that regard, I think it can be much harder. I think, using the Road Warriors as an example, yeah, they had televised matches that stuff was all over the place, right?
Right.
But now people will be on a show having their very first match ever in their life, and they're scared shitless, right? They're just trying to get through this moment in time and survive having their first match on an actual show, and it's being streamed somewhere, right? So from the minute you start your very first match, it's like you're constantly just under a microscope. And so I really do feel for people who can't have, just matches that aren't filmed, that people are going to make a gif of the thing that you messed up on. You're going to end up on Botchamania, and it's like, oh my gosh, it's this person's fourth match. Like, they're just trying to figure it out, right? Like, they're a baby, so let them make mistakes and figure it out. I think the current generation, we also have to kind of like police ourselves with like what we say, because everything is written into a headline article, right?
Yeah.
Whereas in the 80s and stuff, you could say something in an interview or at a diner after the show, in a hotel lobby, and nobody's reporting on this, right? So
Just like this interview, the dirt sheet's going to get you for saying
all the bad
Ellering.
stuff I
Rachel
said.
Ellering hates wrestling fans.
Yeah, the headline is, Rachael Ellering, she hates everybody,
She
okay?
hates everybody.
Yeah, she hates it.
Have you ever been a GIF? Have you ever been a GIF yet?
Oh, I've had plenty of gifts. Thankfully for good stuff where it's like, this move looked really good. So,
Okay.
but I've been on Botchamania, I think a couple times probably, which nobody wants to end up on there. But, you do reach a point and once you get older, you're like, it's just part of it. Like, this is such a hard thing to do. And if people really knew how hard it was, they would be a whole lot less critical. And, you know, it's like, it's live action stunts. Stuff is
Yeah.
going to happen. It just is what it is, right? It's two people out there doing live stunts. So be kind, guys.
Be kind, fans. So let's even make it worse for you, right? So here you're a woman and you're going on, and as a woman gets older, it becomes a little more difficult, right? And the critiques get worse. Where a man can lose a little something, and people just seem to forget, like they're not in as great a shape. What is your training regimen like to keep yourself in shape? And at some point, are you like, I'm just so done with this. This is just too much.
So I feel very fortunate in that I have loved lifting specifically since I started powerlifting. So even before wrestling and learning how to travel and get your workouts in and all that, I just loved being by myself in a gym. And 6 days a week, that's my me time. That is my me time to listen to a podcast, listen to, some good music, and just be with myself. And so I still look forward to it every day. So my schedule, I guess it kind of depends on travel. But I try to lift 6 days a week, at minimum 5 days. I'll usually split up my lifting in kind of like a bodybuilding style, like chest and triceps, legs, back, buys, shoulders. I'll do a full body, or depending on travel, some hotel gyms, they only got 10-pound dumbbells, right? So you work with what you got. At minimum, you can go on a run. So, I 6 days a week, I do cardio just to kind of keep yourself in shape, right? In that regard for the ring, there's nothing like being in match shape from matches, but you do the best you can, right? So Stairmaster, I love running. I'm on a running kick right now. So about 4 of the 6 days out of the week I run. And then, I'll do the elliptical or the Stairmaster the other 2. But that's kind of my training schedule. You try to get ring time when you can. Usually every week at TV before doors open and such, you're down by the ring and let me try this. Let me do this. Hey, Lee Moriarty, what the heck was that transition you just did? That was so cool, right? And so you try to get that little bit of ring time when you can. There's a school in Greensboro called Firestar Pro. And so, they've got a great school with 2 rings. So we can go up there and get ring time when we're home. And then, the hardest part is eating on the road, really. Yeah. And just, you get out of a building at midnight and what's open. And so you try to make good decisions when you can. Yeah. But sometimes it's hard, right? Yeah. My mom always jokes that I always have a protein bar in my bag just in case. You never know, right?
We had Jordan Blue on. She's an independent wrestler, and we got into a conversation about social media and how many guys and women hit on her on a regular basis. How is that for you? How many guys hit on you on social media?
Definitely not as many as Jordan gets. She's cute. I've been on shows with Jordan, so she looks great. Definitely not as many as some of the very gorgeous people I work with, right? It can be flattering, but it also is a little creepy. Sometimes people take it a bit far. I rarely will check my DM request folder for that exact reason. I'm not going to just like mute or ignore people. I will block you. You're being insanely creepy. So
I was told you should mute first, then block. Like it's mute.
Maybe I should do both.
I don't know. But Jordan was saying a lot of the guys are into feet fetishes. Do you have a lot of feet requests?
Ooh, I've had a couple, but not a ton, thankfully. And those are things that like the once every couple months that I check my DM folder. It's let me screenshot that because it's so funny.
Yeah, it is funny, right?
In the locker room, it inevitably comes up eventually, and you're like, you guys read this, like this. So it's something I've reached the point where it's kind of comical. There are people who are genuinely very sweet. So I'm not lumping everybody into the creeper.
We'll just lump them all together. Trust me. If anyone's DMing you, asking you anything, it's just wake up, dude. She has no interest in you. Come on, step into reality, pal.
Nice people trying to get a hold of me who DM, and I'm like, I'm so sorry. I don't check I can't, because it's just, if you check that daily, Not something I need to see.
I'll tell you, I messaged Rachael Ellering. She hasn't messaged me back. I hate her.
I have
Come
heard
on
so
already.
many times people, hey, I DM'd you, you never got back to me. And I was like, I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
Oh, yeah.
Not intentional.
Oops.
Never intentional.
Oops. Sorry.
Sorry.
So how long have you been engaged?
Oh gosh, I should know this like right away. We've been engaged almost, it's over 2.5 years, almost 3 years.
All right. So we're going to do hashtag Chris Hero. Get off your ass and let's get this thing done already. Right? Enough
You
of
know
this.
what? It's not even him. We both,
Look at you defending your man. I wish I had a woman that defended me like that. My wife will throw me under the bus every chance she gets. Are you kidding me or what?
she looks forward to throwing you under the bus.
Yeah,
No,
that's it. So you look forward to, this is what you'll get to see when you get older. But
I
go
would
ahead.
go to battle. I would go to battle for Chris. No, but it genuinely is not his fault. We both kind of shortly after we got engaged, both started working at AEW. So then it's just kind of this whole new life thing that you're experiencing. And I also did not ever grow up with like, this is what I picture my wedding like. This is what I want that day to be like. So honestly, Monty, I have no freaking idea where to have this, what I want it to be like. Still to this day, we've been together over 9 years, and I'm like, oh, we'll figure it out.
Whenever it
Yeah.
happens. So you said you'd get the opportunity to work indie shows. Have you worked some indie shows? And let me ask you this. How often do these promoters screw you out of money? Because I hear this nightmare all the time, right?
Oh, it is an unfortunate truth, isn't it? So yes, I will occasionally work independent shows for promoters. Usually it's that I've previously worked with like West Coast Pro out in San Francisco is a really good example. Scott, the promoter, is one of the best people I've ever worked with in my entire career. That company is so well run. They have a great school, so I can come in the day before and get some ring time. And, they good ring, safe people to be around. So, that's an example of someone I would work for every week if I could, right? Yeah, the not getting paid thing. I fortunately have only had that happen maybe 3 or 4 times in my whole career. So not often. But if you don't mind me sharing a little story, I do have the most memorable. This was maybe like my 3rd year in wrestling.
And by the way, Rachel, use names. Feel free.
I will. Yeah. So it was like a convention that I don't even remember who was hosting in somewhere in Georgia. And I was supposed to have a match on the show, and then there's like a meet and greet thing before. And there were all these legends and, just anybody you can think of, they were there. And we hadn't even like gotten into the area where the ring was to, okay, this is who I'm working with, any of that. And Arn Anderson walked in and was like, the guy doesn't have the money to pay any of us. And I remember being 2-3 years in, you're like, what does that mean? What do I do? Do I have to go talk to him? Like what? And so Tully Blanchard came over and he was like, okay, Rachel, we're going to try to go get the money from this guy. Right. So everybody is just kind of like, what's going on? We're not moving until this gets sorted. And then you see Arn follow this guy out to his car. And you're just watching from a hallway in this building like, oh my gosh, what is Arn going to give this guy a spine buster? Like what's happening right now? And Arn followed this guy to his house where he went and made him get the money and come back and pay us all. And then after that, I remember Tully Blanchard took a couple of us out to dinner. And so the show didn't end up happening. The meet and greet stuff didn't end up happening. So it was the first time also I showed up to something and was like, we're not doing the show? What? Okay. But it's also a hilarious memory now, but it's also just a memory of like, oh, wow, that was so nice of Arn to do that for all of us. One.
And think about that. That guy got nothing for his pay. He paid you guys and he got nothing.
Nothing. Exactly. Wow. And then I got a steak dinner with Tully Blanchard. Nice. I mean, come on. So that is the most memorable I didn't get paid moment of my career. Thankfully, hopefully I don't have to worry about those anymore.
Well, you rolled right into it. You mentioned Tully Blanchard. What are your thoughts about the PC environment, especially like you said about mic skills, you got to be careful what you say or things you say. So, think about Tessa Blanchard. We'll use her as the example, right? Who has been pointed for saying some off-color remarks, whether it's true or not, I have no idea. Whatever the dirt sheets say. Do you think people are just looking for stuff, or do you think in some cases it's warranted for some of the hate that's out there towards a Hulk Hogan, for example?
I think some cases are so warranted. Yeah, and I think that's something that is a good progression in the last couple years in wrestling, of trying to get some of these really scummy people out of wrestling, or at least limit what they're doing, because there are so many really, really good people in wrestling that give them the time, give them the money, give them the focus, right? Like these people, I call them buttheads. I'm like, we don't need these buttheads. Like there are plenty of extremely talented, genuinely good people that are deserving of these spots and time and bookings and all of that and fanfare, that like get the bad ones out of here, because some of them genuinely deserve to be written off because they're terrible human beings that in any line of work would be written off. And so I think there are some people that it's totally justified.
So I'm going to put you on the spot then. Do you think a Hulk Hogan or a Tessa Blanchard should be written out of wrestling?
I think Hulk Hogan should, yeah. And I have no comment on Tessa.
Okay, that's fair.
Mm-hmm.
How about Vince McMahon? Do you feel he's getting his just due for unproven, never been arrested, never proven guilty accusations?
I don't think he should ever work in wrestling again.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. I love your honesty, and thank you for being so forthcoming. I love it. So
yeah.
Where can everybody find the great Rachael Ellering? But again, don't DM her, guys, right?
Yeah, we're not checking those.
We're not checking those, but where can they find you?
Yeah. So like I said, I'm not posting all the time, but I do check, and I am active on Twitter and Instagram. My Instagram is at the Rachael Ellering, and then my Twitter is at Rachael Ellering. You can watch me on Ring of Honor, hopefully AEW at some point. I think that's it. I don't think there's anywhere else you can find me. So if you find me elsewhere, it's not me.
Well, I'll be watching you on AEW, and I'm really looking forward to you having a extended, glorious career. You've been wonderful, and I really enjoyed this conversation. I'm sure Jimmy is upset that he wasn't part of it, but I'm sure
we'll have to do another one.
We'll just probably going to have to do another one. Wishing the best for you. I'm wishing the best for your fiance, that he gets home safely. Thank you. I'm thinking Jimmy's a cat guy. I'm a dog guy. I'm thinking you need some dogs. What do you think?
Oh, with the way we travel, dogs are tough. Cats are a little more, they can stay in the house without ripping it apart. At least our three can, right? We have wonderful cat sitters. They're also our vet techs. So we've got the perfect little situation. We can't add anymore.
But now I'm going to hit you with this, though. Does a cat really love you? Come on.
Oh, one of our cats, Diana, I call her my soul cat.
Okay.
And I think all three of them deeply love us. But, it's also like, it's kind of like kids. It's all about like the person that raises them, right?
Right.
It's like, oh my gosh, my mom is my best friend. I love her more than anything. And I like to think I'm that for my three children.
Rachael, thanks again. And thank you for joining Long Island's #1 pro wrestling broadcast. It was truly an honor.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Be well. I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.